Prince Andrew has officially stepped back, but not by choice. After a devastating private confrontation with Queen Camilla and silent orders from King Charles, insiders confirm that Andrew has quit the royal family under extreme pressure. Once known as the Queen's favorite son, he now walks the palace halls stripped of titles, shunned by staff, and ignored by blood. The final blow? A chilling remark from Camilla that broke him behind closed doors. His departure isn't graceful. It's exile in disguise. What happened behind palace walls that shattered a prince forever? The monarchy isn't mourning his exit. They engineered it. The cold return to Windsor. On a gray December morning in 2023, Prince Andrew returned to Windsor Castle, expecting the deference and protocol he once commanded. Instead, silence greeted him. There were no bowed heads from footmen, no "Your Royal Highness" echoing through the corridors. The staff who had once scrambled to meet his every whim now walked past him with cold indifference. For a man raised inside these walls since the 1960s, it was a surreal, soul-cutting shift. Even the guards stationed at the North Gate, who had saluted him without fail for over 4 decades, refused to meet his gaze. Instead, they stared ahead, still as statues. Andrew tried to brush it off, blaming a lapse in training or an unusual morning protocol. But as he stepped deeper into the residence, it became clear. The snub was deliberate. Windsor Castle, his childhood fortress, had turned into a cold reminder of what he had lost. The silence wasn't just external. It seeped into the very rooms he once claimed as his own. The drawing room where Queen Elizabeth II once held informal chats now stood empty. No aides waited. No secretaries reviewed his schedule. The royal machinery had stopped for him. As he wandered the halls, footsteps echoed in chambers that once buzzed with orchestrated respect. Each step made him feel smaller. No longer a senior royal, merely a man with a fading title. Behind closed doors, staff whispered, not about respect or rank, but about disgrace. The lingering Epstein scandal, the infamous 2019 BBC Newsnight interview, and the January 2022 removal of royal duties had culminated in this moment. Andrew had returned to Windsor not to rule, but to witness the funeral of his own relevance. But if Windsor's silent halls stung, it was nothing compared to what awaited behind the royal doors. A moment that would haunt Andrew far more than cold glances or stiff guards. Because while the staff had turned away, one senior royal chose to speak, and with just a few cutting words, she shattered what little pride he had left. And from that point on, there was no illusion left to cling to. Camilla's icy cut. It happened during a private gathering at Clarence House in early January 2024. The royal family had convened to discuss logistical details around the king's upcoming Commonwealth tour. But the real drama played out off the agenda. Behind closed doors, Queen Camilla allegedly pulled Andrew aside. What followed was not a discussion. It was an execution of dignity. Witnesses say the Queen Consort delivered her blow with startling precision. "You no longer represent this family," she told him, coldly, firmly. Those words, according to one aide, caused a physical reaction. Andrew froze, his face turned pale, and he was briefly unable to respond. It was not only the message but the source that stunned him. Camilla, once an outsider herself, had now become a gatekeeper of the monarchy. And she had just shut the door on him. Within 24 hours, whispers spread like wildfire through the palace. Staff shared stories of the confrontation, noting how visibly shaken Andrew appeared afterward. He cancelled his lunch plans. He skipped a scheduled estate meeting at Royal Lodge. Palace aides remarked that they had never seen him that still. The man who once barked commands now avoided eye contact, his usual arrogance replaced by something unrecognizable: defeat. Camilla's comment wasn't just personal, it was policy. It cemented her role as a decisive power in King Charles's court. Sources close to Buckingham Palace say it was her final push that ensured Andrew would never regain ceremonial privileges. No uniforms at parades, no balcony appearances, not even a symbolic role at Trooping the Color 2024. Her influence had reshaped the royal playing field, and Andrew was off it. Camilla may have delivered the fatal blow, but the blueprint for Andrew's erasure had already been drawn. King Charles, methodical and firm, had been preparing this quiet coup from the moment he ascended the throne. What followed in the coming weeks was not a public denouncement, but something more painful: a calculated dismantling of everything Andrew had ever known. The king's silent dismantling. King Charles III is not a man of spectacle. His leadership style, forged over 70 years as heir apparent, is quiet, deliberate, and devastatingly effective. And in February 2024, he began executing a plan to remove Prince Andrew from royal life, not with loud proclamations, but with a scalpel of bureaucracy and social exile. It began with protocol memos. Staff across royal residences received new directives. Andrew was to be addressed as Mr. Mountbatten Windsor. His previous HRH styling, once restored in informal circles, was now completely retired. The military uniforms once tailored for him with care during his time as Royal Navy officer, 1980 to 2001, were ordered into storage. Within a week, his access to ceremonial events was revoked. The next blow came from within the kitchens. For decades, Andrew had received custom menus at Royal Lodge. Dishes tailored to his preferences, specific wines flown in from Italy, and breakfast served at a preferred 8:15 a.m. daily. Now his meals mirrored those of senior staff, basic, unscheduled, and impersonal. Even his place settings were stripped of crest emblems. The monarchy was making it clear: his royalty was over. But the most painful change was in daily treatment. Courtiers, once deferential, now responded with the same tone used for minor estate guests. No bowed heads, no special entrances, no reserved seating at family functions. King Charles had orchestrated something beyond punishment. He had created a new reality in which Andrew simply no longer mattered. And the silence was the final signature. Revenge of the palace staff. For decades, Prince Andrew wielded his power over palace staff like a blunt instrument. From the 1990s through to his fall in 2022, whispers of his temper and entitlement filled the royal halls. But now, in the cold aftermath of his disgrace, those same staff have quietly and collectively stripped him of the one thing he never imagined losing: their obedience. It began subtly. At Windsor Castle in March 2024, longtime footmen began calling him simply Mr. Windsor. Then the kitchen team stopped preparing his preferred eggs Florentine at 8:15 a.m. sharp. Wardrobe attendants refused to lay out ceremonial uniforms he was no longer permitted to wear. What Andrew perceived as insubordination was, in truth, a long-awaited rebellion. Years of humiliation and silent suffering had turned to quiet satisfaction. These staff, once terrified of Andrew's outbursts, now met his orders with blank stares or polite refusals. They no longer bowed. They no longer smiled. Some even walked away mid-sentence. His presence, once announced with a flurry of preparation, was now barely acknowledged. For Andrew, this shift in tone was perhaps more crushing than losing his royal title. It exposed the truth. Respect that must be demanded is no respect at all. A senior aide, speaking anonymously, put it simply, "We endured him for years, now we don't have to pretend." The palace had issued no public edict, no memo, no press statement. But inside the royal machine, the hierarchy had changed. Andrew was no longer above anyone. In fact, he was beneath their sympathy, and no ceremony or crest would undo that. But Andrew's unraveling wasn't just about staff revolt or silent corridors. Behind the scenes, a far more powerful figure was engineering his exile with chilling precision. She had once been ridiculed, doubted, and marginalized. But now, Queen Camilla was executing one of the most strategic purges the modern monarchy had ever seen. Camilla's power play. As Queen Consort, Camilla Parker Bowles had long operated in the shadows of Buckingham Palace. But by April 2024, her influence was no longer hidden. Senior aides reported it was Camilla, not Charles, who insisted Andrew be removed from Royal Lodge, stripped of ceremonial honors, and pushed into obscurity. This wasn't personal, it was political. Camilla's goal was clear: protect the monarchy's future, especially for Prince William and Catherine. Andrew represented a lingering threat, a scandal magnet tethered to Jeffrey Epstein, a public relations nightmare that refused to fade. Sources say Camilla argued that as long as Andrew held property, title, or presence, the royal family would never escape the shadow of 2019. She positioned herself as the guardian of modernization and Andrew as the rot to be removed. Her strategy worked. Behind closed doors, she consolidated influence over Charles's key advisors, aligning herself with modernizers like Sir Clive Alderton and Baroness Casey. Together, they orchestrated Andrew's erasure not through confrontation, but through logistics. Blocked appearances, reassigned staff, and unrenewed security. One by one, the pieces of Andrew's royal puzzle vanished. It was power exercised with surgical precision, and the world noticed. Media headlines in May 2024 spoke not of Charles's leadership, but of Camilla's quiet dominance. Tabloids labeled her the real queen. Royal biographers noted that, unlike Princess Diana, Camilla didn't seek adoration. She sought control, and she had achieved it. Andrew's exile was not just a family drama. It was a masterclass in monarchy management, delivered by a woman who had once been the most hated woman in Britain. But even as Camilla tightened her grip on royal protocol, the outside world was watching Andrew's downfall unfold like a public execution. Newspapers, pundits, and even former allies turned on him. And what followed wasn't just shame. It was a media storm that exposed every scar he had tried to hide. The public dissection of Andrew. By June 2024, British media had fully turned Prince Andrew's fall into a televised saga. The BBC replayed his 2019 Newsnight interview in prime time, dubbing it "The Moment It All Fell Apart." The Guardian ran an exposé titled "From Royal to Ruin," while The Times questioned why he still remained in the line of succession, despite being exiled, humiliated, and disgraced. Commentators like Richard Fitzwilliams and Emily Andrews didn't mince words. They called Andrew a walking liability, a man so blinded by privilege that he believed consequence was for others. In radio interviews, former palace insiders described how Andrew treated protocol like a weapon, and how that arrogance accelerated his isolation. His name became synonymous with scandal, and not the kind the monarchy could control. Across social media, The backlash was relentless. Viral threads compared Andrew's treatment to that of Harry and Meghan, asking why public exile came only after media pressure, not moral responsibility. Hashtags like #Prince of Nothing and #Royal Exile trended for days. Even tabloids like the Daily Mail, once soft on Andrew, now declared him unfit for public life. The monarchy, sensing public sentiment, remained silent. No defense, no denial, no rebuttal. The media had taken control of Andrew's narrative, and the palace let it happen. Because in letting the headlines do the work, the Crown ensured one thing: there would be no comeback tour. The prince was being dismantled, on front pages and in public memory alike. An exile in Sandringham. By July 2024, the last act of Prince Andrew's royal dismantling unfolded in quiet cruelty. Forced relocation to a remote cottage on the Sandringham estate. Once a secondary home for royal getaways, it was now his permanent address, far from Windsor Castle, away from London, and out of public view. No formal statement was issued, but the message rang loud inside palace corridors. Andrew was no longer welcome where history was made. The move wasn't presented as exile, but insiders knew the term fit. King Charles, with Camilla's full support, had orchestrated what aides called a controlled withdrawal. This wasn't just about scandal management, it was about prevention. No more surprises, no more photos of Andrew lurking near state events. Royal watchers noted the timing. His exile coincided with Princess Charlotte's 9th birthday celebrations, from which Andrew was notably absent. Even family milestones were being cordoned off. Andrew was allowed only limited staff, stripped of security detail, and reportedly offered just 2 rooms for his use. Gone were the formal breakfasts, the flag-bearing ceremonies, the press attention. The cottage was quiet, isolated, surrounded by acres of woodland, and silence. "He's like a ghost in his own family," one courtier remarked. "Visible only in name, not in presence." It was monarchy's way of turning down the volume on a once booming scandal. Though royal aides tried to frame the move as practical, UK tabloids painted a different picture. The Mirror called it royal house arrest, while the Telegraph referred to it as the monarchy's padded cell. The cottage had no nameplate, no title, no pomp. For a man once labeled the Queen's favorite, this was the ultimate betrayal, and his final royal stage had no spotlight. As Andrew adjusted to life in quiet Sandringham exile, the outer trappings of royalty had vanished. But what lingered, what festered, was the internal unraveling. Without position, privilege, or purpose, Prince Andrew began to fracture not just publicly, but psychologically. And those closest to him feared the worst. Psychological collapse. Inside the walls of Sandringham, August 2024 became the month Andrew stopped pretending. Staff reported seeing the disgraced Duke pacing the estate grounds late into the night, often barefoot, sometimes in tears. Rituals that once anchored his life, 7:30 a.m. military briefings, tailored meals, uniform inspections, had disappeared. And with them, so had his sense of identity. Andrew reportedly refused to vacate Royal Lodge until the final legal order arrived, weeks after his move. Even then, palace sources said he asked to visit the lodge weekly, requests that were ignored. His world, once defined by royal entitlement, now revolved around unanswered emails, declined invitations, and the absence of any formal role. "He's clinging to ghosts," one longtime staffer whispered. Not just of his title, but of who he used to be. He became reclusive, Family members, including Princess Eugenie and Beatrice, visited less frequently. Friends from the Royal Navy days stopped calling. The isolation deepened when his name was removed from the guest list of the 2024 Remembrance Day ceremony, a first in 39 years. Andrew saw the exclusion not as strategy, but betrayal. "They've buried me alive," he was overheard saying. Psychologists consulted by Palace Aides noted symptoms of deep identity crisis. In sessions with his private therapist, arranged discreetly through Clarence House, Andrew expressed paranoia that Charles wanted to erase his entire existence. His dissent was no longer abstract. It was real, visible, and dangerously raw. For the first time in his privileged life, Andrew was not feared, not revered, but pitied. But even amid this psychological storm, Andrew had not fully given up. Behind closed doors, he scrambled to salvage what he could: his reputation, his freedom, his relevance. But what emerged instead was desperation, and a trail of damning digital footprints that exposed the truth he had tried to bury. The leaked emails. In September 2024, The Guardian published a cache of private emails allegedly from Prince Andrew's confidential inbox, dated between November 2023 and July 2024. The messages painted a picture of a man unhinged, begging old allies for cover, cash, and influence. More damaging than the tone of desperation was the content. References to Jeffrey Epstein, legal favors, and contradictory claims about his involvement. One particularly devastating thread showed Andrew emailing a former diplomat in Monaco, asking for assistance securing non-extradition residency if future legal actions escalated. The same email included veiled references to media leverage and files from 2011, suggesting Andrew still possessed materials meant to be bargaining chips. The implication was clear. He was not just afraid, he was preparing to run. Another leak included emails between Andrew and Lady Victoria Hervey, a former Epstein associate. In them, Andrew appears to thank her for holding the line and asks her to continue steering the narrative. These exchanges directly contradicted his 2020 BBC claims that he had cut ties with everyone in Epstein's orbit. The press pounced. "The lies keep coming," read one Daily Mail headline. Social media exploded. The royal family went into damage control. Lawyers threatened outlets. PR aides met for emergency meetings. But the effect was irreversible. Andrew's last shred of plausible deniability had evaporated. The prince wasn't just disgraced. He was exposed, cornered, and digitally undone. The emails confirmed what many had long suspected. His public silence had been nothing more than a facade. With no more secrets to hide and no more defenders at court, Prince Andrew found himself in the one position no royal can afford: utterly irrelevant. What came next wasn't a scandal. It was a final, permanent severing of ties. The monarchy had tolerated enough. The gates were closing, for good. The monarchy closes the gates. In October 2024, King Charles III held a private meeting at Balmoral Castle with senior advisors, including Sir Edward Young, Camilla, and William, Prince of Wales. The agenda was brief: formalize Prince Andrew's permanent removal from all royal functions. What had begun in whispers was now made policy. Andrew was no longer a working royal, and he would never be again. The language was precise. No public engagements, no representation at state functions, no military honors, not even substitute appearances at Trooping the Colour or Commonwealth Day. The family, media was told, would proceed without distraction. Charles's final order: we protect the institution, not the individual. Even in private, Andrew's presence was restricted. Seating charts at Christmas 2024 were adjusted to place him far from Prince George and Princess Charlotte, symbolic and deliberate. Andrew's reaction was predictable: shock, then fury, then silence. Friends say he refused to speak for 3 days, retreating to his Sandringham cottage with blackout curtains drawn. But there were no protests, no letters, no appeals. He had no power left. No title could shield him. And now, no one within the crown would fight for him. The British public's response was swift. Polls showed 82% approval of Andrew's permanent removal. International coverage praised Charles's firm hand. For the monarchy, it was an institutional purge wrapped in quiet diplomacy. For Andrew, it was a death knell. The prince, who once walked beside queens, presidents, and generals, now sat alone, uninvited, unwelcome, and unforgettable for all the wrong reasons.
So, what does it truly mean when a prince steps down, but isn't allowed back up?
For Prince Andrew, this resignation from the royal family isn't some voluntary retreat. It's the final curtain on a long, painful, and very public downfall. Camilla's alleged words, "You no longer represent this family," weren't just cruel. They were calculated. A queen-in-waiting wielding the kind of quiet power that slices deeper than any public headline. Make no mistake, King Charles has chosen his legacy, and that legacy doesn't include his scandal-ridden younger brother. From the removal of HRH titles in 2022, to quiet exclusion from key ceremonies in 2023, to the silent exile to Sandringham in 2024, this wasn't a decision made overnight. It was a slow, deliberate dismantling of Andrew's status. One title, one privilege, one room at a time. And yet, behind the palace walls, what we're witnessing is more than just family drama. It's a royal machine cleaning house, streamlining the monarchy for survival in a modern world. Andrew represents everything the firm wants to bury: unchecked privilege, outdated arrogance, and dangerous scandal. With Prince William and Princess Catherine rising as the future face of the crown, there is simply no space for a disgraced duke. But don't think for a second that Andrew will quietly fade into the shadows. Reports suggest he's bitter, broken, and considering his next move. Whispers of a tell-all memoir circulate. Some insiders fear he may seek to weaponize secrets he's held for decades. After all, the royal family may have shut the door, but Andrew still knows what's buried beneath the carpets of Windsor, Sandringham, and Balmoral. And what about the public? Polls reveal that over 80% of Britons support his permanent removal from public life. His reputation, already obliterated by the Jeffrey Epstein scandal, is unlikely to recover. No apology, no statement, no redemption arc seems possible. Even charities, once his last refuge, have distanced themselves completely. This isn't just about one man's disgrace. It's about the monarchy drawing a line in the sand saying, enough. They couldn't control Andrew in his prime, but they will contain him in his fall. The message is chillingly clear. No one, not even a prince, is immune from consequences. And yet, amid all the silence, one voice continues to echo through the palace halls. Not from Andrew, but from Camilla. Her rise from royal outsider to royal enforcer is nearly complete. By humiliating Andrew behind closed doors, she didn't just protect the monarchy, she proved she now controls it. So now the gates are closed, the title's gone, the portrait removed from the royal gallery. Prince Andrew hasn't just quit the royal family. He's been erased from it. And the world is watching what he dares to do next. Let me know if you'd like this added to your document or extended into a full outline or script.